Hello, everyone. This is the 102nd episode of the Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog, and I'm joined by Paul from Shipley in England and the 1888 Letter blog. We are pleased to have Mr. Davey Naylor back on our podcast. To remind everyone, Mr. Naylor is the administrator of EnglandStats.com. We continue our interview series with Mr. Naylor as we discuss the matches of the England national team during the 1989-90 season and the 1990 World Cup. Hello, Davey. Welcome back.
Good morning, gents. How are we all?
Right, thank you, and welcome back, Davey.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
To kick us off, can you just summarise the state of the English national team at the start of this season with the 1990 World Cup on the horizon?
Well, yes, a lot of excitement going into this World Cup at the time, but also a little bit of a trepidation because don't forget that with the hooligan aspect of is still very much part of the English game, sadly, and the authorities are very worried about it. England are put into a lot of people think that England are being favouritism because England are put in to a group. They are nominated as a seed, which a lot of people didn't think that they should be. They think that they did that. The Italians and FIFA did that simply because they can then control where England's matches were, and they do. They put them on the island basically so that they can keep them nicely corralled, as it were. Whether that is true or not, I don't know. I think there's probably an aspect of it. So there's a bit of trepidation going into this World Cup. England are in their best form, I guess, under Bobby Robson, and they've got a great chance of doing really well in this World Cup. They've got quite a tough group. They've got the Netherlands and Republic of Ireland and Egypt, who they've only played it once before, I believe. And there's a lot of excitement, but also, the mood is quite, a little bit, dodgy.
At the start of his season, do you think Bobby Robson had written out the calls for his sacking from the previous fall?
They don't forget, 88 was a disaster, obviously. 86 was there was a lot of sympathy for Robson in 86 because of what had happened with Maradona and the way that England went out of that tournament. So I think the press were off his back for that. But during 88, the dismal failure of the Euro 88, very much so, he had already tried to resign after that tournament, but the FA wouldn't let him. He kept doing this in favour of Brian Clough, but the FA would never be Brian Clough was never the type of person that the FA were ever going to appoint England manager. They were too fussy and fuddy-duddy, and imagine them sitting around the rooms with smoke-filled rooms. Brian Clough, can't possibly have him as England manager. So they kept saying to Robson, "No, you've got to carry on." So there was faith in Robson, I think, from the FA, although his contract was about to run out after this tournament. So they had, Paul might correct me on this, they might have already arranged for Taylor already prior to the season starting. This year starting. So I'm not entirely sure when his appointment was made, but they thought that, Robson could go on and finish out his contract. Yeah.
I think it was later on when the decisions were made. I think it was closer to the World Cup itself. I don't think it was
prior to the World. It was prior to the World Cup, wasn't it? Yeah. That's
yes,
what I remember.
I think it was known that it was going. Yeah, it was going to be Robson's last tournament.
Yeah. So you read into that what you may. That obviously they wanted him to stay out. I think mostly because they would have had to pay him lots of compensation if they'd have sacked him early. And of course, you've got to give him another. When you stuck by him after the '88 fiasco, the results really weren't there. But England qualified quite easily for the 1990 World Cup. So, they had to stick with him, I guess. But they kind of said, well, let's just give him this one more chance and see what he can do. He was safe, let's just say, going into the World Cup. Yeah.
The season starts with a qualifier on September 6, 1989 at Stockholm against Sweden. For this match, we have the following lineup. We have Peter Shilton of Derby County in goal, Gary Stevens of Rangers Glasgow, Scotland, Stuart Pearce of Nottingham Forest, Des Walker of Nottingham Forest, Terry Butcher of Rangers Glasgow, captaining the side in Brian Robson's absence, Neil Webb of Nottingham Forest. He was due to join Manchester United shortly thereafter. In this match, he'd be replaced by Paul Gascoigne of Tottenham in the 72nd minute. And in fact, Neil Webb would suffer a very serious injury shortly after joining Manchester United and would be more or less out until the World Cup. So his regular season was over. Then we have Steve McMahon of Liverpool, Chris Waddle, who had just joined Olympique Marseille in France, John Barnes of Liverpool. He'd be replaced by David Rocastle of Arsenal in the 76th minute, Peter Beardsley of Liverpool, and Gary Lineker, who had joined Tottenham that season. So this match ended as a scoreless tie, just like the previous fixture, previous season at Wembley was a scoreless tie.
I can't say I remember much about this game, except one thing, and I think the iconic image of Terry Butcher with a bandage around his head, streaming with blood. If anyone can remember that picture, it's from this game. He gets a cut to the head early on, and it just, how they let him go with, I mean, he's just absolutely covered, isn't he? So how they let him go on with this, it's I have no idea. I mean, there are a few chances in this game. I think McMahon has one, and Lineker has another good chance. But the draw is quite good for England. England are still top of the group with one game to go. Well, Sweden have two more games to go, but England have one. But they are within distance. They only need a point now, and they've got to play Poland next. I don't remember the game particularly too much, apart from obviously the look of Butcher. But it's England are on the cusp of the World Cup.
I think that image is definitely the one, and it's part of English football history. With Poland a few years later,
it happens to Ince, doesn't it? In Italy, yeah. But it is an absolutely iconic image of him just being the Guardian says a Butcher spirit takes England within range of the World Cup. Yeah, it's a fantastic, iconic image, which just sums Terry Butcher up. I'm going to fight to the death, sort of like thing, which is kind of like something England really needed. And even though it was a drab 0-0 draw, I think that's really that kind of, I don't know, Dunkirk spirit really kind of like galvanised the not just England team, but also fans at the time a little bit. They thought, right, okay, we're gonna see this through no matter what. We're going to qualify, and then coming into the World Cup, we're going to do our best, even though we don't necessarily have the best team in the tournament. But that classic English sort of spirit that people like, the lion roar sort of attitude. I think that really galvanised the team at that point.
How was the loss of Neil Webb viewed at the time?
Well, yeah, as you said, he just gone to Man United. He's one of those midfield players. Don't forget, you have Brian Robson, who was still the England captain, and he was injured at this time, but he was expected to make the World Cup. And you've got players like Chris Waddle, John Barnes. Yes, okay, they're kind of wingers, but you've got Steve McMahon coming through. Players like that, Neil Webb was a good player, but I don't know whether he at this point of his career really. I mean, he's more than halfway through his England career, whether he's really nailed down a spot just yet. So he's certainly in Bobby Robson's plans, but I'm not entirely convinced he would have been first choice at this point. So yes, it's a blow, and the reports are that he would probably still make the World Cup. So it's a blow for preparation, I suppose. It'd be nice to see him. I think he'd had 19 caps so far, so he'd established himself reasonably well. But yeah, it's a bit of a blow, but not a big one, really.
England's final qualifier was on October 11th against Poland at Chorzo. For this match, we have Peter Shilton, Gary Stevens, Stuart Pearce, Des Walker, Terry Butcher, Steve McMahon, Brian Robson, captain of the team from Manchester United, David Rocastle, Chris Waddle, Peter Beardsley, and Gary Lineker. England earned a scoreless tie, and they were through to the World Cup. And in fact, they did not concede a single goal during qualification.
Yeah, the big standout is they get the point that they need in this game. Again, it's not a great game, 0-0 draw, but a 0-0 draw away from home, which is very useful, takes you to the World Cup. Sweden still have another match to play, and they actually do win the group because they win that match, and they win that. So Sweden go to the top of the group with 10 points. England are on 9 points, but as you say, they don't concede a goal in the entire qualifying phase. This one, again, it's the only notes I've got on this match really is England's 650th match. 650th match, and they qualify for the 1990 World Cup. That's about it really on this one.
Do you guys remember if there were any celebrations after qualification after this match?
I can't remember, to be honest. I really can't remember. It wasn't a great match, so the celebrations weren't. We didn't qualify in style, let's just say. But I think it'd been growing since the Sweden game that England being on the cusp of qualifying, then actually doing qualifying. It was quite. I think there was. Shilton, I believe, had a few heroics during this game. I think he saved a few shots. If there were celebrations, I think they were muted. I don't recall anything particularly extravagant going on.
I think, yeah, similar to Davey, I think there was an expectation that England would qualify from this group, but with memories of Euro '88 still fresh, there was nothing over the top. I don't think this time about being among the favourites or anything like that. So I think it was more job done from the qualifiers.
Well, the experimentations started as early as November. So on November 15th at Wembley, England hosted the World Cup hosts Italy. So for this match, we have Peter Shilton. He'd be replaced by international debutant Dave Besant of Chelsea in the 46th minute. Gary Stevens, Stuart Pearce. He'd be replaced by international debutant Nigel Winterburn of Arsenal in the 67th minute. Des Walker, Terry Butcher, Steve McMahon. He'd be replaced by Steve Hodge of Nottingham Forest in the 67th minute. Captain of the team, Brian Robson. He'd be replaced by international debutant Mike Phelan of Manchester United in the 46th minute. This would be his one and only cap for England. We have Chris Waddle, John Barnes, Peter Beardsley. He'd be replaced by international debutant David Platt of Aston Villa in the 78th minute. And Gary Lineker. So scoreless tie, but I guess the takeaway are the many debutants for one match.
Yeah, but a third 0-0 in a row. So we're not setting the world alight here. I think what this game showed Bobby Robson that actually they weren't a bad side. They weren't brilliant, but it showed the world that we can muck in with the best. I mean, Italy, whilst being hosts, so they've not played a competitive game for a couple of years, but they're still regarded as one of the favourites for the World Cup. And England showed that they can go toe to toe with them. So, whilst it gives comfort to say that England are going to be okay, it doesn't suggest that we're going to win the World Cup. more importantly, yes, it's an interesting game this because this is David Platt's first cap. He is nominally a backup for Brian Robson. And boy, does that become a very shrewd move because Robson does have this tendency, poor him, to injure himself during tournaments. He did so in the '86 World Cup. It will happen again in this one. And Platt will take over that midfield role and effectively take it from him because he does really, really well. And Brian Robson is so crock all the time, poor thing. I think it's his shoulder. I don't know whether it's his shoulder again or the same thing. But we've got other interesting debutants. Mickey Phelan, who it's his only cap. I don't think he does very well for Man United. Don't forget, this is the time when Man United's resurgence came under Ferguson. He's part of that initial squad. Dave Besson, who is probably more remembered for dropping a jar of mayonnaise on his foot than anything else. Nigel Winterburn, obviously, being in that classic Arsenal lineup alongside Tony Adams. Yeah, he gets a cap, but he only gets one further one. And Hodge, of course, who played in the previous World Cup, he kind of like comes on in the second half. So Robson is really kind of like, trying to now that the World Cup is secured, the most important thing, the qualification is secured. He's just really trying out different things. I think he starts off with his strongest 11 there. He starts off with strongest 11, and then he's kind of like bringing bit part people on. Of course, don't forget, yes, he's lost Webb. So I guess Steve Hodge coming back is quite a useful thing. And the emergence of Platt, only gets about 12 minutes in this game, but I think he will start emerging as we get towards the World Cup and during the World Cup. He's very much comes to the fore, especially during one particular game in the very last minute of extra time.
As you mentioned, this is a third straight goalless draw. I seem to remember there was a little bit of a worry in the scoring department. If Lineker wasn't scoring, there didn't seem to be too many alternatives. But at the same time, obviously, it was nice to be solid and keeping the clean sheets at the back. What
Exactly.
were your memories of that?
Exactly. That was the really good thing. They proved that they can have clean sheets, which is great. Solid Butcher Walker defensive partnership with two very good, almost wing backs, you'd say, Stuart Pearce and Gary Stevens, really. I mean, it's quite a good looking team. I mean, Barnes and Waddle on the wing, classic Barnes, classic Waddle on the wings, with Beardsley and Lineker, that great partnership, which has served so well during the last World Cup. You've got Brian Robson and Steve McMahon in the middle. Steve McMahon is just up and coming. This is only his eighth cap. But it's a good looking side. But yes, I think Lineker is a bit shy on goals right now, but that will come back. I don't think Robson's overly worried, really. I don't think so. I personally, if I were England manager, I'd rather not concede goals than score goals. So, you get a lot further in tournaments if you don't concede any. But yeah, not scoring is a worry. But I guess he would figure that that's going to come along and they're going to find their scoring boots anytime soon. Well, I don't think we've had the draw yet, so they can't really prepare properly. I think the draw comes the following month after this game. So the next game they will probably know their group and they can prepare properly for it.
So the next match is on December 13th, 1989, again at Wembley, England hosting Yugoslavia, another World Cup qualifying team. So for this match, we have Peter Shilton. He'd be replaced by David Besant in the 46th minute. And this would be Besant's second and final cap for England. Both of them within a month of one another. Paul Parker of Queen's Park Rangers, Pierce. He'd be replaced by international debutant Tony Dorigo of Chelsea in the 46th minute. Des Walker, Terry Butcher, Michael Thomas of Arsenal. This was his second and final cap. His first cap had been in the previous year. He'd be replaced by David Platt in the 67th minute. Then you have David Rocastle. He'd be replaced by Steve Hodge in the 67th minute. Captain of the team, Brian Robson. He'd be replaced by Steve McMahon in the 75th minute. Chris Waddle. Steve Bull of Wolves. Let's remember he's still in the second division. And Gary Lineker. This match, England will win 2-1. Brian Robson scores twice, the first one after 38 seconds. At the time, this was the fastest goal in the history of Wembley. Chris Waddle takes a free kick on the right side and Robson heads it in. Harry Scoro tied the match in the 17th minute with a long-range shot. And in the 70th minute, Brian Robson scores the second goal. Paul Parker crossed from the right side, and this was nodded across by Bull towards the onrushing Brian Robson to score. So at least we got a couple of goals now.
Yes. Yes, Captain Marvel's come up and scored a goal. First one timed at just 38 seconds, I have, which is the fastest ever goal at Wembley. Well, international goal anyway, yes. This is a competent performance, if not a comfortable one, but it's good because there is now no game now and for 3.5 months. So it's good that you get through the new year on a positive rather than a negative. So, but I don't think Robson would have learnt overly too much again, apart from how useful Brian Robson is. I mean, as from midfield can score it quite freely, especially when your main striker is his goals are dried up. Lineker now hasn't scored for quite a while for England. But yes, you get to see. Nice to see Michael Thomas and Tony DeGrigo, who does feature a few times, but mostly under Graham Taylor. Tony DeGrigo faces Dave Besson. Yes, whether he's the backup keeper or not, I guess he doesn't choose Besson as backup keeper because obviously this is his second and last cap. I'm also unsure whether Peter Shilton had said that he was going to retire after this World Cup yet. I don't know whether he'd made that public. He might probably have made it private, said it privately to Bobby Robson. So, but then who the backup keeper, who becomes number one keeper after that is not Bobby Robson's problem. That's Graham Taylor's problem. So I don't think he needs to do his work for him. But yes, this is it's good that England could finish 1980, finish the decade with a win, even against a very talented Yugoslavia side. With Dragan Stojkovic was their main creative player. He was pretty good. It's a good win, if not a comfortable win.
The World Cup draw in December pitted England against the Republic of Ireland, the Netherlands, and Egypt. Very similar to the 1988 Euro finals. Was there a worry as a result?
Against those teams, I guess so. It was a tough draw. England were normally made seeds, but I did speak about that earlier, that they thought that they didn't really deserve to be seeded. Don't forget, there is no FIFA ranking at this point. That doesn't come to later. The ELO ratings, which are retrospective, weren't even around yet. So they had no. They used to kind of use performances in previous World Cups as the guide to who would be seeded and not, but it was very, very arbitrary. So I think the authorities in Italy and in FIFA were very worried about England and their followers. So they gave them a seeding, which was great for England. It meant on paper it meant that they could get easier opposition. I don't think they did when the draw came out, but at least the authorities can control where the England fans were and corral them on one little island and stop them getting on the mainland and causing havoc. As it was, England did reasonably well, so there wasn't any need for that. I don't remember that much hooliganism at the Italian World Cup. Maybe the Italian food made them soporific. I'm not entirely sure, but I don't remember there being too much trouble, which was good. It always helps when England do well. The bad element seems to come out when England don't do well. But I think Holland and Netherlands were a difficult prospect. Nobody really knew anything about Egypt, but the Irish team was most definitely, I think, the biggest worry. I seem to remember, because that team was a very, very, very good team. They all played, most of them played in English First Division. So everybody knew who they were. So on paper, it was very strong. So yeah, it's a tough group, basically, but one I think any Englishman would be confident of getting out of, especially the way that the format worked. Don't forget that this is a 2014 World Cup. It's very similar in format to the current Euros, where you have 6 groups of 4, but then you need to get down to a final 16, as it were. So what you do is you get the top 2 group winners plus 4 of the best 6 third place teams. So you only really had to, you could still come third and still get through. In fact, we'll see later on that actually Netherlands and Ireland finish on exactly the same points in second and third, and that they can only be separated by drawing of lot. I think the mood is after the draw that it's tough, but I think England can get through. Nobody knows about Egypt. We think that they're the whipping boys. They don't turn out to be at all. But I think all Netherlands and Ireland, Republic of Ireland and England fans would be confident that Egypt that's a win there, rightly or wrongly. So I think everybody's confident to get through, to be honest.
As the new year started, would it be fair to say that Bobby Robson had his ideal lineup in mind, or do you think there were still starting places up for grabs?
Well, of course, I don't think he would have ever said that I know my full starting lineup, and he would always be open to new players coming through. But yes, he does seem to keep playing the same starting lineup. Butcher, Walker, Pearson, Stevens. You've got Beardsley and Lineker up front with Waddle and Barnes on the wings. And the only real difference is really the midfield two, because as we've mentioned, we'd lost Webb. Brian Robson can come in and be spectacular in one game, and then the next game he's not fit. So David Platt in the next game comes in and has his first start. So there is room for new players, as we can see. Of course, the squad is, I believe, 22. I think he could have taken 22 players. So whilst he's still looking for some new players, I think on the whole, I think he knows who his starting 11 are going to be, really, I think. Yeah.
The first friendly of the year 1990 and the decade, in fact, is a high-profile friendly at Wembley against Brazil on March 28th. For this match, we have Peter Shilton. He'd be injured and replaced as early as the 11th minute by Chris Woods of Rangers Glasgow. Gary Stevens, Stuart Pearce, Des Walker, Terry Butcher, captaining in Brian Robson's absence, Steve McMahon, David Platt, Chris Waddle, Peter Beardsley. He'd be replaced by Paul Gascoigne in the 78th minute, Gary Lineker, and John Barnes. This was the first match at Wembley as an all-seater stadium. Other things to mention. First off, England won this match 1-0. Gary Lineker scored a winning goal in the 37th minute. So Peter Beardsley took a corner from the left side. John Barnes flicked it on, and Gary Lineker headed it in. Incidentally, on this day, March 28th, England and Republic of Ireland were scheduled to play friendly, but they scrapped it because they were in the same World Cup finals group. Another incident of note during this match was the Brazilian Luis Miller had a shot saved on the line with Stuart Pearce handling it. And this is before VAR, and the referee did not see it, and no penalty was awarded. But nevertheless, an important win against quality opposition.
Very much so. I mean, Brazil are always the one you want to beat. England have done it so few times. This is one of the rare wins against Brazil. It's But more importantly, I think England defended really, really well. They clung on to that lead. Lineker found his shooting boots, and England clung on to that lead even during the first half, during all the way through during the second half. It's interesting the off the line goal. The East German referee clearly is intimidated by the Brazilian players, and actually the video footage shows them pushing and barging him. And he actually takes his red card out of his back pocket at one point, ready to brandish it to a couple of Brazilians who are literally pushing him. But he doesn't. He kind of wimps out and then goes across to his lineman and says, "What am I going to do here? I can't have them pushing me around. Let's just not award the goal at all, or any penalty or anything like that." And so he wimps out completely. So in a way, it could have easily have been a 1-1 draw, which I think England would have taken it against Brazil. Brazil are still one of the best two teams in the world at this point. They are one of the favourites to win the World Cup. It is entirely possible that England could meet them at a later stage of the World Cup. So it's a great knowing that England can go toe to toe with them defensively and not concede and even win a game. Notable, yes, Shilton gets an elbow to the face in the first 10 minutes and I think he needs 8 stitches. And eventually the medical staff say no, let's. It carries on a little bit with a bandage around his head, but I think the medical staff eventually they take him off and Chris Wood come on. Paul Gascoigne is back, which is a much needed boost for Bobby Robson, and we've got David Platt taking over for understudying for Brian Robson, and I think Bobby Robson is very, very pleased about this because he can't be sure how his captain is going to get through a tournament. So it is great that he's got a very good backup in David Platt. But again, other than that, it's the same team that we've had a couple of times now. So he knows what his starting lineup is, I think, now. Yeah.
Do you remember the press reaction after a win against Brazil?
Well, yeah, we're all going to win the World Cup now, isn't it? That's the usual thing. We're all going to win it now. But you can get a little bit carried away with beating Brazil. As I say, England very rarely do beat Brazil. So why not get a bit carried away with it all? As long as you come back to earth before the tournament starts, and that will happen in the next game. So, yeah, as long as you keep your feet firmly on the ground, have a bit of fun, why not?
So the next friendly was on April 25th, again at Wembley against Czechoslovakia. For this match, we have Peter Shilton. He'd be replaced by David Seaman of Queen's Park Rangers in the 46th minute. Making his international debut, Lee Dixon of Arsenal. Stuart Pearce, he'd be replaced by Tony Dorigo in the 46th minute. Des Walker, he'd be replaced by Mark Wright of Derby County in the 46th minute. Terry Butcher, Trevor Stephen of Rangers Glasgow. Captain of team Brian Robson, he'd be replaced by Steve McMahon in the 76th minute. Paul Gascoigne in his signature match. Steve Bull, Gary Lineker, and Steve Hodge of Nottingham Forest. The Czechs would take the lead through Thomas Skuravi in the 11th minute, but then it would be the Gascoigne show. In the 18th minute, he sent a long ball towards Steve Bull, who controlled it at the edge of the box and volleyed home. In the 23rd minute, it would be Paul Gascoigne's corner kick from the left side that would eventually be put in the net by Stuart Pearce. In the 55th minute, Gascoigne would cross from the right side and Steve Bull would head in his second goal of the night. The Czechs would pull a goal back in the 81st minute through Lubos Kubik, who scored from a free kick. And finally, in the 89th minute, Paul Gascoigne would receive a pass from Tony Dorigo and would just go on a solo run around an opponent and score. So England won 4-2 in this match.
Yes, sorry, I misspoke earlier. It wasn't this match that England will come a cropper. It's a couple of games later, but which is good, I suppose. because with all of this euphoria of beating Brazil and then beating Czechoslovakia 4-2, you need to keep your feet on the ground. So Robson, I don't know whether he was pragmatic enough to think that, maybe we need a loss here later on, just to keep everybody's feet on the ground, because yes, the mood in England and the press is that England are now going to win the World Cup. The odds of them have shortened. They put two good results together against two really good teams, and we're starting to get carried away with the whole thing. So it might be quite a good thing coming up if England can keep their feet on the ground. We don't want to get too carried away with everything. Yes, this is a fascinating game. Gascoigne and Bull really do stand out amongst the players. Bull, as you say, playing for Wolves in the second division still, and Gascoigne is back at his best, at his pomp, or maybe this was. Maybe we hadn't seen this from Gascoigne. Don't forget, this is only his 8th cap. He's only 22, so maybe we have not seen this from Gascoigne. We've probably seen it on the pitch for Newcastle and now Tottenham, but we certainly haven't seen it so much in an England shirt. So this is pretty good. We've got to, and don't forget what Gascoigne was. I mean, I can't think of another player, probably another Englishman with so much. I mean, Bellingham at the moment is currently, I think could become something like Gascoigne. Well, I mean, he does have that ability, but I think Gascoigne is certainly one of the best players that England have ever produced, and having a gifted young playmaker like that who can score amazing goals on his own is absolutely fantastic. Bobby Robson must be, licking his lips. We've just beaten Brazil. We put 4 past Czechoslovakia. I've got all my team. Most of my team are fit. Robson's back. He's fit. Lineker's not scoring, but he'll get there. And we got Gascoigne. I mean, rightfully so. People were talking England up. If only they could get rid of this hooligan element, then they would have been everybody's favourites, I think, at some point.
Yeah, this much definitely earned Gascoigne and Steve Bull their places. I mean, I think, like you said, with Gascoigne, we have to remember he wasn't actually an established England player at this point. He was, this really was the game where he first made a mark for England, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So now we come to the last 3 friendlies before the World Cup. On May 15th, again at Wembley, England hosted Denmark and would win 1-0. Gary Lineker scoring in the 54th minute. Steve Hodge would cross from the left side and Lineker would strike in the winner. For this match, we have the following lineup. Peter Shilton, he'd be replaced by Chris Woods in the 46th minute. Gary Stevens, Stuart Pearce, he'd be replaced by Tony Dorigo in the 46th minute. Des Walker, Terry Butcher captaining the side in Robson's absence. Steve McMahon, he'd be replaced by David Platt in the 78th minute. Steve Hodge, Paul Gascoigne, Chris Waddle, he'd be replaced by David Rocastle in the 70th minute. Gary Lineker, he'd be replaced by Steve Bull in the 70th minute, and John Barnes.
Gary Lineker kind of starts. This is when he starts getting his shooting boots back on. He's had a bit of a drought beforehand. This is a very, very drab game again, and the Lineker's goal in the start of the second half is really the only highlight of it. Again, a very good Danish team. So England are doing really well. I think we talked just now about England euphoria coming into a World Cup. I can't remember until recently, last couple of tournaments, where we actually gone into a tournament actually winning quite a few games. It's build-ups for England matches, England major tournaments have always been, good on paper, but the results have never really really borne that out. But he's getting some really good. It's now May with the World Cup only just over a month away, and England are still winning. We got another game against Uruguay next coming up, so we'll see what happens there. But England are great. You got Lineker firing again. You've got new players coming through like Platt and Tony DeRigo, and you've got McMahon cementing his place in there. Steve Hodge is back. Gascoigne is coming through. So you've got a settled back four really. There's a bit of tinkering going on, but it's Walker, Butcher, Stevens, and Pearce. That's your back four, and it's been that for all year so far. Really, back into '89, it's been that, and you've got Barnes and Waddle on the wings, and Lineker through the middle. It's pretty much very much settled, the team. Incidentally, this is Chris Waddle's 50th cap. And so it's everybody's pulling in the right direction. Bobby Robson must be really, really pleased. The press have forgotten completely about calls for him to be sacked and getting somebody else in. So everything is looking rosy at this point.
Well, the following week on May 22nd, again at Wembley, England hosted Uruguay. So for this match, we have Peter Shilton, Cole Parker, Stuart Pearce, Des Walker, Terry Butcher, Steve Hodge, he replaced by Peter Beardsley in the 78th minute, captain of the team Brian Robson, Paul Gascoigne, Chris Waddle, Gary Lineker, he replaced by Steve Bull in the 78th minute, and John Barnes. England would lose this match 2-1. Santiago Ostalaza opened the score in the 27th minute. John Barnes would tie the match in the 51st minute. But Uruguay would score the winner in the 62nd minute through Perdomo from a free kick. I guess maybe the expectations were lowered after a loss.
Yeah, I guess. But as I said before, England had gone on a 17-match unbeaten run, which totally revived Bobby Robson's managership after the 1988 Euro fiasco. It was going to burst at some point. It's probably best to happen before the World Cup. Because certainly don't want it to happen during the World Cup. Yeah, Uruguay, of all the teams that England have recently played, Uruguay were not necessarily the ones you think would actually, beat England. They were a good team, but certainly no Brazil, and certainly the Czech team and the Danish teams I think were stronger. This is Lineker's 50th cap as well, and John Barnes' 10th goal for his country. So it's, albeit he does equalise, but then 10 minutes later, Uruguay get the winner. I don't remember much about this game, to be honest. It was a bit of a letdown, but in the grand scheme of things, is that not a good thing? Really, I think you don't want to get things, to go too mad. With we're all going to win the World Cup, so this had tempered expectations, I think. This game, but I think Robson was still quite happy. We got Paul Parker starting. It's his 5th cap, but he would obviously come into the World Cup team as we go on. But again, Robson is now back in again. He's not injured this time. He's either injured or he's not injured. It then throw the dice. What happens with Brian Robson? But again, it's the same team. We've got Gascoigne has come in a little bit for Beardsley is kind of like taking his place a little bit. But yeah, it's exactly the same team, really. The core of the team is still there. He's got that core. He's got your Walker, your Butcher, your Shiltons, your Lineker, and your Barnes and your Waddles. That's the core that you see over this progression into the World Cup.
So the last friendly before the World Cup is on June 2nd at Tunisia. For this match, we have Peter Shilton, Gary Stevens, Stuart Pearce, Des Walker, Terry Butcher. He replaced by Mark Wright in the 61st minute. Steve Hodge, he replaced by Peter Beardsley in the 61st minute. Captain of the team Brian Robson, Paul Gascoigne, Chris Waddle. He'd replaced by David Platt in the 78th minute. Gary Lineker, he'd replaced by Steve Bull in the 78th minute, and John Barnes. Abdelhamid Hergal gave Tunisia the lead in the 26th minute. Actually, he picked up a misplaced pass by Paul Gascoigne, and he volleyed from far outside of the box. But and England would only tie the match with a minute remaining when Barnes crossed from the left side and Steve Bull headed it in.
Yeah, so going into the World Cup, having seen the draw, known who they were up against, there was only really one unknown for Bobby Robson, and that was Egypt. He knew the Dutch team, he knew the Irish team. We didn't need. In fact, as we said, that the friendly against Ireland was cancelled. There's no need to play them in a World Cup year. If you're going to play them in a World Cup, you're going to give the opposition too many sighters into how you. And there really is no need. The only unknown was Egypt. So the FA tried to find a suitable, similar team. Playing Tunisia in Tunisia just prior to the World Cup seemed like a good bet. And despite the result, the 1-1 result, I think this put England in very good stead for what it was like coming into the World Cup. I think the result belies the experience that they've got. They're playing against North African opposition, which they will do in a World Cup. And I think people at the time think this is a Bull's final goal in the last minute. It's kind of like saves England's blushes. Yes, true, but I think the experience that they got during this game, it was a very, very useful match to have, and I think this helped them, especially in the heat of Tunisia in the middle of June. It must have been stiflingly hot, and it's not a million miles away from where they're going to be playing most of their matches across the Mediterranean. So it's a useful exercise, and you've got Steve Bull coming back again, proving that he shouldn't be playing in the second division. He really is a first division player, and again a very settled team. Same team again: Robson, Waddle, Gascoigne, Lineker, Barnes, Des Walker, Peter Shilton in goal. There was no real experimenting. I'm pretty sure he would have named his squad. I think actually he has done because they're playing squad numbers at this point, so we all know, and that gives you an indication as well of. Sometimes it gives you an indication of a manager's thinking. So most of the team are numbered 1 to 11. Gascoigne's number 19, and Hodge is number 18. So Beardsley is 9. So maybe thinking that Beardsley will probably start ahead of Gascoigne, and I can't remember who 4 is.
Neil Webb.
Webb. Oh, right, because that's right. He's just come back, hasn't he? He's just got fit again. He was included in the team. So maybe Webb for Hodge, and then you've got your starting lineup. Whether Webb can make it or not, we shall see.
So let's take a look at England's final 22 for the 1990 World Cup. Number 1, starting goalkeeper Peter Shilton of Derby County. Number 2, Gary Stevens of Rangers Glasgow. Number 3, Stuart Pearce, Nottingham Forest. Number 4, Neil Webb, Manchester United. Number 5, Des Walker, Nottingham Forest. Number 6, Terry Butcher, Rangers Glasgow. Number 7, captain of the team, Brian Robson, Manchester United. Number 8, Chris Waddle, Olympique Marseille in France. Number 9, Peter Beardsley, Liverpool. Number 10, Gary Lineker, Tottenham. Number 11, John Barnes, Liverpool. Number 12, Paul Parker, Queen's Park Rangers. Number 13, backup goalkeeper Chris Woods of Rangers Glasgow. Number 14, Mark Wright of Derby County. Number 15, Tony Dorigo of Chelsea. Number 16, Steve McMahon of Liverpool. Number 17, David Platt of Aston Villa. Number 18, Steve Hodge of Nottingham Forest. Number 19, Paul Gascoigne of Tottenham. Number 20, Trevor Stephen of Rangers Glasgow. Number 21, Steve Bull of Wolves. And number 22, third goalkeeper, David Seaman of Queen's Park Rangers. However, on June 15th, FIFA authorized England to call up David Besant of Chelsea, to replace David Seaman, who'd been injured.
He'd injured his thumb. So FIFA allowed them to change their third goalkeeper. Dave Besson got called up instead. But as I said, you can see directly into Bobby Robson's mind with the squad numbers. 1 to 11 is his preferred starting lineup. Shilton, Stevens, Pearce, Webb, Walker, Butcher, Robson, Waddle, Pearce, Lineker, Barnes. That is his first choice starting line, which he has consistently mostly played since England had qualified for the World Cup. You've got some variables such as Tony Dorigo, Mark Wright as well, which we know he will play some games. Gascoigne, of course, Bull, who we know is a very able deputy for Lineker, and Steve Hodge as well, who. So you've got a lot of talent there, some good players. I can't, off the top of my head, remember if there was any furore about anyone being left out. I don't think there was. I think most pundits agreed that this was probably the best squad that you could take. I'm not entirely sure if Paul, if you know of anyone who missed out on this one, particularly.
Maybe Tony Adams and maybe David Rocastle.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. That's it, yeah. But yeah, I think on the whole, most of England and most of maybe a couple of Arsenal fans might have liked to see Adams and Rocastle in, but other than that, I think this is quite a good squad, really, the best that he's got available.
The World Cup kicked off on June 11th for England against Republic of Ireland at Cagliari. For this match, we have Peter Shilton, Gary Stevens, Stuart Pearce, Des Walker, Terry Butcher, Brian Robson, Chris Waddle, Peter Beardsley. He replaced by Steve McMahon in the 69th minute. Gary Lineker. He'd be replaced by Steve Bull in the 83rd minute. John Barnes and Paul Gascoigne. England would take the lead in the 8th minute through Gary Lineker. But Steve McMahon, he would be robbed by Kevin Sheedy, who would score the equalizer in the 73rd minute. The match ended as a 1-1 tie. And we have to point out a couple of things that Peter Shilton tied Pat Jennings' international record of 119 matches. And also, England played with a sweeper system in this match. But otherwise, it was not a good match to watch.
No, I remember this match very distinctly. It was my 17th birthday. I was watching it in my bedroom on a tiny little black and white TV. Back in those days, that's all I could afford. Yes, England started brightly, and then Steve McMahon came on in the 70th minute, and 3 minutes later, he gave the ball away on the edge of the area to Kevin Sheedy, and oh dear. Other than that, I don't much remember much about the game, too much. It's a shame because I think England had done reasonably well during the game, but the same old problems come back. And it's frustrating, really, because England had up until recently seen these kind of games out against Brazil, against Denmark, for example. They've seen these games out when they'd scored early and made sure that that they gone on to win the game, but they couldn't do it. A simple mistake by the substitute, lack of concentration, and you lose a point. But having said that, I think going into the game, I think a draw would have been. I think Robson might have said, "Yeah, I'll take a draw. I think I'll take a draw in this game." And what else helped England at this point is that the Netherlands are also drawing against Egypt in this point, and this becomes quite crucial in this group. Later on, we'll get to it. It's quite a. I don't think I've ever seen a World Cup group like this with what happens, but we'll get to that because nothing actually. Well, that's the point. Nothing actually happens till the last group game. To be honest, yes, it's disappointing, I guess, but I think they'd take the point any day. I think
difficult team to play against at that time, Ireland, and I think with what happened in Euro '88, although it was a mistake that gave them the goal. I think it was it was, if anything, a relief to have got through it with a draw, surely, at that stage.
I agree completely. Yes, they lost 1-0 2 years prior to the same team in the opening group game. So almost 2 years to the day. In fact, almost. I think it was the 10th of June, '88, or 12th of June. One of the two. I can't remember. So almost 2 years to the day, and they lost that game. But so I guess that's progress for you. So yeah, not a spectacular start. In fact, this you could summarise that as England's World Cup. Nothing happens until you get to the knockout stages. Really, it's very, very, very drab. But then all of a sudden, it kind of picks up a pace. But yes, a very, very mediocre start, really. And it's such a shame that it's on one person's mistake, really. That other than that they played reasonably well.
So the next match is on June 16th, again at Cagliari against the Dutch. For this match, Peter Shilton in his record-breaking 120th cap. Pierce, Walker, Butcher, Robson. He'll be replaced by Platt in the 64th minute. Waddle, he replaced by Bull in the 58th minute. Barnes, Parker, Wright, Gascoigne, and Lineker. So this match against the Dutch of Ruud Gullit and Marco van Basten, the one significant moment, I guess, in another drab match was, I believe, England were awarded an indirect free kick. And I think Paul Gascoigne scored directly from that free kick and scored a goal, but it was called off. That was like the only significant event in this match that I remember.
Yeah, it was Stuart Pearce. Was it Pearce? The free kick?
Yeah, I think it was a Pearce Thunderbolt, I think.
Oh, was it Pearce? I thought it was Gascoigne. Oh, maybe I mixed it up. Yeah.
Gascoigne was the turn in this game. The turn was his moment in this game.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, as you say, another drab game. Again, though, in the other match in the group, there's also a draw. So there have been 4 draws so far in this group, and everybody's sitting there on 2 points. And England, you would think, going into the easier game of the group, on paper at least, would have the advantage. But the Egyptians had drawn against the Dutch and then against the Irish. So who knows? Yes, a good Dutch team. Yes, everybody knows Gullit and Van Basten and what they did to England. How they are obviously winners of the '88 Euros, and they faced England. In fact, it's almost like a replay, isn't it, of the '88, where Ireland and the Netherlands are the 2 teams that they faced in the group stage there. Rijkaard as well, Ronald Koeman, Jan Wouters. A great Dutch team, European champions. And I think there's some honour in fact this is the, I think that the Observer headline is some honour in this draw. So I guess the press were thinking that England were probably going to get beaten again like they did 2 years ago. But it's a 0-0. It's drab. It's not much happens, as you say. But England are still in the World Cup. They've played 2 really good opponents and have come out with 2 credible draws going into the last group game. There is optimism.
I think, as you mentioned, it was probably with Euro '88 in mind that Bobby Robson introduced this sweeper system. It seemed a bit late after 8 years in charge to try a new system, but he brought Mark Wright in. Can you remember the reaction to that? It was quite a bold move for Bobby Robson to change his system at this stage.
Yeah, and I think that was the reaction, really. It's a bit of a surprise because you've not done it before, and then you didn't do it in any preparation. Then all of a sudden, the World Cup, you just decided to bring a sweeper system in. So it's clearly something that he's seen, especially for those initial first 2 games. Because I don't think he deploys a sweeper for the Egypt game. It's back to a flat back 4.
Yes,
so
yes.
I'm guessing that he thinks the best. He's got strength in defence, so he's thinking, why don't you just stick an extra man in there? and have him run around and pick up all the things, pick up all the loose balls. And I guess it works, really. I mean, as I said, he's very pragmatic, is Bobby Robson. I think he would go along with, best to not concede too many goals than to score too many. So, and that's kind of what England do through this tournament. That they don't score too many, but they don't concede that many either. In fact, that as far as I can remember, 3 out of the 6 games they played, they got a clean sheet. They do reasonably well in that regard. He then, for the next game, he does go back to flat back 4. I think he's thinking, look, we need to win this game against Egypt because the opportunity to win the group is right there. He played 2 of the best teams in the World Cup, in the group, let alone maybe even the world, especially Europe. So we've now got an opportunity to go ahead and win this group and have a more favourable knockout stages. It's an odd time to change your system, but it kind of works for him. You're not, as long as you're not losing matches. It's the way that he thought that the team could best nullify those threats of Ireland and Netherlands.
For the second successive World Cup, Brian Robson was lost to injury.
Yeah.
How was this viewed at the time, and did anyone expect David Platt to step up as he did?
Well, yeah, it's a sad thing seeing. I can still picture the TV image of Brian Robson being walked off the pitch again, and the fact that it's happened yet again. It happened in the previous World Cup, as you said. Yeah, it's like lightning striking twice. Platt he's only had 6 caps so far, so he's been brought into the squad as a deputy for Brian Robson. He's not the same player as Brian Robson. I mean, they're totally different players. I don't think we know really what. I mean, I guess Villa fans know what he's like, but I don't think the rest of us really knew David Platt. I mean, he soon becomes one of the better players in this generation. So yes, he's a very able deputy, but I don't think we knew that at the time. We were just really sad that Brian Robson had gone, because he could do quite a lot of things. Brian Robson, he was quite remarkable. That's why his nickname was Captain Marvel. It's just he was quite astonishing with how many goals he would score from a midfield position, and his fearlessness in scoring them. He put himself in so much danger, and that, I guess, led to his downfall. Again, he'd been injured going into a tackle. So yeah, it was a shame, but I think Robson might have known that he'd had an able deputy. So it's always a blow when you lose your captain, of course. Who knows what the World Cup would have been like? Who knows what would have happened if, don't forget, we will hear about Platt scoring later on in the nick of time. Who knows what would have happened if Robson hadn't injured himself? Would England have got that far? Would they have been knocked out of penalties earlier? Who knows? That happened.
I think finally on this game, maybe a little bit unnoticed, strange as it sounds, but Peter Shilton became the world record winner of caps in this game. But do you remember much coverage of that at the time?
I don't. I don't remember that. I remember that he obviously finishes on 125. That's the one thing I do remember. I can't honestly say that I remember him breaking the world record at this point. No, but I mean, fantastic. I mean, what a. I mean, the guy. Forget his first cap was in 1970 with Bobby Charlton and Bobby Moore running around as well. It's quite incredible. You think of Shilton as someone who played during the 80s and specifically this World Cup. I think a lot of people would remember Shilton for, but he did start off playing with those greats back then. It's a great achievement to do it, and he's 40 years old. Don't forget, he's 40 years old and he's still as young as ever. I don't think he moves around during the penalty shootout, though, which we'll get to later on. He's not the most energetic keeper. He doesn't quite get to any of the shots, I don't think, but he's still a a great shot stopper and also a great leader as well. I think they used to call him a foghorn. You could hear him shouting at the back, he'd just bellow at his defence. Someone I think you'd want between the sticks, I think, definitely.
Yeah, I don't think it got as much attention because it was in the midst of a World Cup campaign. It was maybe sort of buried a little bit with all the other things that were going on. But as you say, it's a great achievement.
So we come to the final match in the group on June 21st, again at Cagliari, England against Egypt. And as you mentioned, Bobby Robson reverted to a 4-4-2. For this match, we have Peter Shilton captaining the team, Stuart Pearce, Des Walker, Paul Parker, Mark Wright, Steve McMahon, Paul Gascoigne, Chris Waddle, he replaced by David Platt in the 86th minute, Gary Lineker, John Barnes, Steve Bull, and he replaced by Peter Beardsley in the 84th minute. So England would win this match 1-0. Mark Wright scoring in the 64th minute. Gascoigne took a free kick from the right side and Mark Wright headed it in. And England won the group as Ireland and the Dutch drew 1-1 in the other game.
Robson had changed things up slightly here. There's no Terry Butcher in this game. He's gone back to the flat back four with Parker, Pearce, Walker and Wright. And he's added a bit more firepower. He's not gone to replace Brian Robson directly. He's added Steve Bull in, and Gascoigne is drafted in as well. So he's not gone directly for the Platt replacement yet. He's decided that he's going to go with a bit more firepower, have Bull and Lineker up front. But it's a defender, Mark Wright, who scores, as you say, scores from a header, beats the keeper to that free kick. And that's the goal that settles the group, really. In fact, not just the game, it settles the group. Every other game in the group, I don't think it's happened before or since. Every other game in the group is a draw. The one that's played simultaneously between the Netherlands and Ireland is also a draw. As I said earlier, it means England win the group and go on to play Belgium. And Netherlands and Ireland have the most identical record. They don't have a system of fair play, how many yellow cards you have to settle things like that. So they literally drew lots to try and fight. They both qualified anyway. They both had qualified because they both done enough for whichever one was in third place to be one of those 4 third place lucky losers kind of like thing to go through.
In the second round, like you said, they faced Belgium on June 26th on the mainland at Bologna. For this match, with England back playing with the sweeper system, we have Shilton, Pearce, Walker, Butcher captaining in Robson's absence, Parker, Wright, Waddle, Lineker, Barnes, he replaced by Steve Bull in the 74th minute, McMahon, he replaced by Platt in the 71st minute, and Gascoigne. We have to mention that Paul Gascoigne would be booked in the 88th minute, and that's important for later on. But this match would go into extra time just a minute before the end. In the 119th minute, we have the iconic David Platt goal with Paul Gascoigne lofting up a free kick, just lobbing the free kick, and David Platt scoring with an overhead kick. And this goal has cemented his place in England football history. It's one of the most much referenced events of this World Cup. What was the reception back home after such a goal?
Well, we were all dancing in the streets. It was quite ridiculous. We were back from prior to the World Cup, we were going to win the World Cup, and then during the group stage, we're not going to win the World Cup. Oh, we're going to win the World Cup again. It's this is the English attitude. It goes up and down like a yo-yo. But this is absolutely iconic. Again, not much happens during the preceding 100 and 19 minutes. But that the goal, especially with John Motson, iconic commentary as well, which I can remember in my head. I can just hear him say, "The last minute of extra time," and a little break in his voice as he says it. But it's and it's quite a fantastic goal as well. I must admit. I mean, you wouldn't expect anyone to score from the position he's in. He wraps his foot quite unhuman-like, really, how he gets his foot around the ball. It's a Gascoigne free kick that he just lobs into the area. Yes, and of course, it's very important to mention the yellow card that Gascoigne gets. This is very important. Yes, and Robson's gone back to that sweeper system again. Butcher's back; he's captain now again, and we're back to that kind of like a sweeper system with 5 at the back. But the rest of the team really is McMahon, Waddle, Gascoigne, Lineker, Barnes as usual. And this was the moment, I think, that for an Englishman, the World Cup came alive for me. That World Cup came alive because that excitement of scoring in the last minute, the way to do that is, I think that's we were all running around dancing. I seem to remember running around dancing in the street, running around the house. In my being over exuberant when this happened, it was quite. I seem to remember it was quite late at night as well, because I think the kickoff was 9 p.m. So this would have been almost nearly midnight by the time this had happened. So it was quite late on, but it was a great feeling to get through to a quarter final of a World Cup. It's always a great feeling, and to do it that dramatically. We're all expecting penalties, and don't forget England had not had a penalty shootout before. We didn't really know what to expect with a penalty shootout, and they didn't need it in the end.
So England qualified to quarterfinals, and on July 1st, they faced the surprise of the World Cup, Cameroon. So for this match, we have Peter Shilton, Pearce, Walker, Butcher. He'd be replaced by Trevor Steven in the 73rd minute. Waddle, Parker, Wright, Lineker, Barnes. He'd be replaced by Beardsley in the 46th minute. Platt and Gascoigne. So England took the lead in the 25th minute when Pearce crossed from the left side and David Platt headed it in. In the 61st minute, Terry Butcher fouled Roger Milla in the box, and Emmanuel Koundé scored from the penalty kick. A few minutes later, in the 65th minute, Cameroon took the lead through Eugene Ekeke. It would take until the 83rd minute for England to get back in the match, and Gary Lineker scored from a penalty kick. For the second match running, England's match went into extra time. And in the 105th minute, England were awarded another penalty kick, and again, Gary Lineker scored from a spot. England were 3-2 winners and qualified to the semifinals.
Well, what a game. That's all I can say about this. This is probably, other than the next one, probably the most iconic game that I can remember for that World Cup. And what a journey as well. 3 penalties in the game, going to extra time. It's quite a roller coaster, this one was, being glued to the TV, despairing. Because don't forget, Cameroon were nobody knew anything about Cameroon until they came into this World Cup. Roger Milla obviously became an icon after this. They'd beaten Argentina in the world champions. They'd beaten Argentina in the opening game and had qualified to the knockout stages, what would have been Argentina's supposed route into the knockout stages. So whereas Argentina they finished 3rd in their group. They got to the final, obviously, with Maradona and those players, but they had to do it the hard way, beating Brazil in the second round. It's an epic game with Gary Lineker holding his nerve to score 2 penalties, and we all thought it was okay. It was all done and dusted. Platt scored early, and then during the second half, then Cameroon just when Roger Miller came on, he was super sub. 40-year-old Roger Miller came on and he changed the game, sending Akeke through to. And there was at one point, Cameroon had gone ahead after the 65th minute, and Lineker rescues it with his first penalty, and then next one right at the end of the first half of extra time. Don't forget also that about just after Lineker scored the equalising goal in regulation time, Mark Wright gets a cut above his eye and he gets a bandage. So another one of those iconic images of an England player with a bandage on. But he was allowed back on the pitch, but he couldn't really head the ball because he hadn't had stitches. Yeah, he needed stitches, but of course they didn't have time to stitch him up. So they just put a bandage around him and said, just don't head the ball. So he was pretty useless as a defender. So they stuck him out on the wing. And I believe it was Trevor Steven he was on at this time. He went back as a right back, and Paul Parker came into the middle. And as you know, Paul Parker is like 5 foot nothing. And, so having this tiny little defender in there against all these tall players was a bit, but he managed to get through all of extra time. So that was an extra worry we all had. Our nails were absolutely shredded during this game, and of course it was the Cameroon had become everybody's second favourite team during the tournament because the way that they had swaggered through the tournament, are totally unfancied, and it almost England couldn't win in a way because everybody was backing Cameroon because everybody wanted the first African nation to get through to a semi-final. So don't think there was England fans, and I think everybody was then, all the Italians in the crowd would be backing Cameroon. So what a game. That's all I can say. The memories live long in them and they will never go. It's an epic game against two. On paper you'd think that England should win it comfortably, but these things never go that way. What a team that Cameroon team was. Great stuff.
So England qualified to the semi-finals, and on July 4th, they faced West Germany at Turin. So for this match, we have Shilton, Pierce, Walker, Butcher. He'd be replaced by Trevor Steven in the 70th minute. Incidentally, this would be Terry Butcher's final cap for England. He's 77. His first cap had been in 1980. We have Paul Parker, Mark Wright, Chris Waddle, Peter Beardsley, Gary Lineker, David Platt, and Paul Gascoigne. For this match, West Germany took the lead in the 60th minute through Andy Brehme. It was a free kick that ricocheted off Paul Parker, who tried to block it, and the ball just lobbed over Peter Shilton. But England would fight back, and in the 81st minute, Gary Lineker tied the match. And the match would go into extra time for the third match in a row for England. During overtime, David Platt scored a goal which was disallowed. Chris Waddle also hit the post. But obviously the most iconic moment was in the 99th minute when Paul Gascoigne received his second yellow card of the World Cup, and irrespective of the result, he would have missed the next match. And of course, we all remember the tears of Gaza and all that. The match would go into penalty kick shootout. And like you mentioned earlier, the Germans were just so much better, and Peter Shilton did not make a single save. And we all remember Stuart Pearce missing his attempt, and for the last kick, Chris Waddle shot it over the bar, and England were eliminated.
Again, another iconic match, which anybody who watched it would never leave them, really. It's weird, really. We have this fixation with Germany about there are rivals, and it's all. But I don't think it's only a one-way thing. I think that the Germans, their main rivals are the Dutch or the Italians. They don't really consider England as their rivals. We just have this fixation with Germany, I guess. Another great match. Yes, the first goal. First half is very cagey. Not much happens. The only thing that really happens in the first half is Rudi Völler injures his calf and has to go off. That's the only really thing that happens about 5 minutes before the interval. And in the second minute, yes, the free kick, really unfortunate, hitting Paul Parker and just ballooning up over the top of Shilton, who is out of his goal. You could argue that a more sprightly goalkeeper could have backpedaled faster and tipped it over the bar. But, I think it's really unlucky a goal to give away. And then Gary Lineker's iconic equaliser, which he the way that he turns the ball, lets the ball go past him, and then he just turns and just whacks it in between two defenders is great. And then, of course, yes, we got Gazza's tears and, talk to him, all of that sort of thing, and all of that iconic sort of like thing, which I'm sure we've must have seen ad infinitum on many programs, nostalgia programs down the past. I did just want to talk about I did a bit of analysis on the penalty shootout. This is England's very first penalty shootout. Never had one before. In fact, the shootouts were not a thing, really. You initially you play a replay, but it was the late 70s. I think 76 Euros was the first time penalties became a thing. England hadn't actually faced one yet. And I think it shows. So I've done a bit of analysis. So 3 of the England kickers go for power. They blaze it in, Waddle included, trying to blast it over the bar. That one is probably still going. I should think it was hit so hard. Germany, only one of them went for power. The most of the German penalties were placed. I think it was quite evident that England hadn't practiced penalties as much as the Germans. The Germans knew, maybe they knew that Shilton wasn't 40-year-old Shilton. If they placed the ball into the corners, they clearly had a strategy. Place the ball in the corners, and Shilton isn't going to go anywhere near them. And in fact, Shilton, I don't believe Shilton touches anyone, any of the balls. I mean, not to say that England's penalties were bad. Certainly, Beardsley and Platt and Lineker, obviously, they were good. Lineker had good practice in the game before. So, but it's interesting as well that when Olaf Thon scored, he kind of passes the ball into the net. Shilton takes a kind of like a little step. He takes a little step to the left just before he's about to kick it, which basically is undoing, because now he can't get back and he can't quite get his hand to it. So it just eludes him. And why he took that step, I don't know, because if he hadn't done, he probably could have saved that penalty. And then the rest is history, obviously, with Pearce saved by Ilner. Thumped down the middle, basically. Ilner, all he had to do was, he was diving to the right. All he had to do is stick his leg out to do it, because it was hit with such force that he hardly dived out of the way in time. And obviously Waddle blazing over the bar, again, hit as hard as he can. That was England's strategy. Very, very basic strategy for penalties. Hit it as hard as you can. The Germans were more subtle about it. They were placing their balls. Only Lothar Matthäus, he thumped the ball, their second penalty. He thumped it into the side. He was the only one who went for power. The others went for placement. So, yes. And such a sad ending. Argentina had beaten the hosts, Italy, the night before. So the crowd was very sparse. A lot of Italians probably would have come to see this, to see who Italy would have been playing in the final. But Argentina, very mediocre Argentina team, managed to get to the final. So you could have a debate whether whoever won this semi-final possibly was going to win the World Cup, as it was West Germany do. But there has never been up until recently, well, certainly not in a World Cup anyway, never been a better opportunity to emulate 66 than this moment. And they were so close to it, and they were gearing up. the tournament had started slowly, but the euphoria that was coming from England as well was reaching the players in Italy, and it was a balmy summer that they were having, and they were so close to doing it. It's been talked about ad nauseum, so I'm not going to go on too much about it, but they were very, very impressive. England were very, very impressive. Did they deserve to lose? Well, somebody has to win, don't they? So it's a shame. You know, West Germany were a very, very, very strong team, and it's a shame. I say England. I suspect England could have beaten Argentina in that final as well, and could have won that World Cup. But you know, it wasn't to be. But we still got great memories from it.
So we come to the third place match on July 7th against host Italy at Bari. So for this match, obviously there's no pressure on either team, and the match has the feel of a friendly. So we have Peter Shilton captaining the team, Gary Stevens, Des Walker, Paul Parker, Tony Dorigo, Peter Beardsley, Gary Lineker, Mark Wright, and he'd be replaced by Neil Webb in the 71st minute. Steve McMahon, he'd be replaced by Chris Waddle in the 71st minute. David Platt and Trevor Steven. So the match would only come to life towards the last 20 minutes. In the 71st minute, Roberto Baggio, he robs the ball from Peter Shilton, and Schillaci takes it. And Schillaci passes back to Roberto Baggio, who is actually in an offside position, and he scores the first goal. 10 minutes later, in the 81st minute, Tony Dorigo crossed from the left side, and David Platt headed in England's tying goal. It was his third goal of the tournament. With a few minutes left on the 86th minute, Paul Parker fouled Toto Schillaci in the box, and Schillaci scored from a penalty kick, and Italy were 2-1 victors. Incidentally, after that, Nicola Berti scored a perfectly valid goal with a header that was called off unjustly for offside. So England lost the match. Italy won the bronze medal. England did at least win the Fair Play Award at this World Cup. And
would have wanted that.
Yeah. And the likes of Terry Butcher and Peter Shilton shortly after retired from the national team. With Peter Shilton, it was his 125th cap. This was his final match for England. And it's worth noting that Peter Shilton and Des Walker played longer than any other player in this World Cup. In fact, outfield player like Des Walker, he played the equivalent of a single extra match with the accumulation of all the extra time matches.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it? Yeah, I didn't watch this match. I think a lot of people probably didn't watch this match. It's just, I very, very bad of me not to watch this match, because, I mean, what's the point of a third? I've always thought this about third place. I didn't watch the 2018 third place match, England-Belgium, either, because what's the point? Nobody wants these matches. Nobody wants a bronze medal. Nobody wants to be fourth. You just what? I don't understand why they do these matches anyway. It's a kind of like a showpiece sort of like thing, isn't it? And it was, as you said, no better than a friendly, really. I don't remember much of this because I didn't watch it. I mean, I've researched it since, but you know. Oh well, yes, yeah. Peter Shilton, 125 caps, fantastic. Yes, Terry Butcher. He didn't actually play in this match, so the West Germany game was his last. But he retired from England duty after that. Lineker would go on for another couple of years before retiring after the '92 World Cup. But Platt would come. Platt scored again in this game, and he would go on, become England captain and lead England through the dark days of the Graham Taylor years. What can you say? It's Scalacci, I mean, he won the Golden Boot. Italy were a great team. They did really well in that tournament. They were undone in a semi-final against Argentina, who were really not a very good Argentina side. They were certainly a shadow of the team from '86. And it's just, I can't get over the fact that they need to play these kind of games. Really, it's a bit silly, really, isn't it? But yeah, there we go. End of Bobby Robson. We look back now and think. I mean, I look back with a bit of fondness with Bobby Robson. Yes, I know that the press vilified him quite a lot. Certainly not as much as they do his successor. But it's the old adage, if you keep winning games, it keeps the press off your back. There were times when the press really, really went after Bobby Robson. There were times, as I've described before, that he wanted to resign and the FA wouldn't let him. Hated all that intrusion, but he was a very, very, in a way, simple man, really, in his managerial things. He knew how to get the best out of England, and the majority of the time he did just that. And he was a whisker away from emulating Sir Alf. His final record: played 95 games, won 47, drew 30, and lost 18. And most of those were 7 of those were friendly losses. So yeah. I think one of the up there in for England managers. Not necessarily his record is the best. There are others. I mean, Sam Allardyce, 100% record. I mean, but he lives long in my heart. Does Bobby Robson, bless him, because he took England on a journey. One of the most iconic World Cups that I can remember. The '86 World Cup as well for me. Both those World Cups I was young, I guess, and impressionable, I suppose. If you look back at them now, they're technically not quite so good. And then the lows of the Euro '88 as well. It was a roller coaster ride, and I'm very fond of Bobby Robson, so I'd always have him in high regard. One of my favourite England managers during that whole period. It all starts going a little bit wrong after that until Venables gets hold of the reins and it starts coming back, for Euro '96, and we go through it all again. And it's semi-final again with West Germany again. Sorry, Germany this time. So yes. It was a great ride while it was happening, but ultimately it didn't end well. But I think the mood back home, that the players came back to a really, really good reception. Gaza became a iconic superstar. Those tears, with a little bit of help of Spitting Image, with his tears, and Gaza mania took off as well. And he was not to be eclipsed until probably Beckham came along, but the kind of iconic footballer, English footballer. So yeah. Great times, I think. I'm proud to and thankful to have lived through them.
So many English players stood out. The obvious ones are Gascoigne, Platt, Lineker, and Walker. Who were the disappointments, you think?
I don't know if there were. I mean, John Barnes can always frustrate. He was such a great player, and could when he played for Watford and then Liverpool, would always terrorise defences running up and down that left wing. For some reason, when he put an England shirt on, never really transpired that he did much. In fact, actually, I believe he wouldn't even play in that game. That's right. That's what it was. I knew he didn't play much part in it. Yeah, he was benched basically for the West Germany game. So yes, I would say Barnes was a disappointment. Chris Waddle, barring his taking his thrashed penalty out of the equation, I don't think he had that great a World Cup. Yeah, there were Shilton again. He didn't get any of the penalties.
I would say Shilton and Butcher started showing their age, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely Shilton, especially that Bremer goal where, as we talked about, we looped off Parker and he couldn't pedal back fast enough. Butcher, yeah, showing his age, I guess.
I also think Gary Stevens was a regular up until the World Cup, and then Paul Parker kind of took over as a defender.
Yeah, that's right. And we don't know what. Yeah, Paul Parker became that more regular kind of right back, doesn't he? Rather than Stevens. So yeah, what the thinking behind that, I don't know, but yeah.
And I also think perhaps Neil Webb and maybe even Trevor Steven were taken for sentimental reasons.
Yes, Webb was clearly not fit. He only actually makes one appearance, and that is in the third place playoff with Italy. So Webb was he was hoping that those squad numbers tell you everything. He was hoping Webb was that they were him and Robson were going to be his centre two partnership, and at the end, actually, he had neither. For that most of the tournament, for the most important games, he ended up with Platt and Beardsley, I think, most of the time in that midfield, and sorry, McMahon in that midfield to centre partnership, and that might have been also. I did, McMahon for me as well was another one who didn't, he didn't. He made a few little mistakes which cost England, which could have been. But then we're nitpicking here, really. I think a little bit. There were so many good things that came out of the tournament, even though it was ended in disappointment. I think the emergence of Platt, emergence of Gascoigne, Lineker obviously still banging them in, and and England defensively on the whole were reasonably sound. With Mark Wright as well, he was this odd sweeper system but it worked. It worked for the majority of the matches he played it. Technically, you could say that England didn't lose that semi-final. I mean, it was a draw, really, if you want to be technical about it. But so they didn't actually. It was only really the meaningless game at the end that they lost during that tournament. But yeah, there was some good players coming through, and combined with the old guard, I mean, I think they did as well as they possibly could, and they were pipped at the end by bad luck. A lottery of a penalty shootout. If during qualifying a year or so prior to the World Cup, if somebody had said you're going to get to a semi-final of the World Cup, I think most Englishmen would have snapped your hand off. I think Bobby Robson certainly would have done. So, but when you get that far, you want to go on the next step, and it becomes disappointing. But I think England did. They were impressive during that tournament, slowly building up to impressive, and it was only luck really that stopped them from going on to win it all.
Sorry, Davey.
I was just going to say it's a very simplistic point of view, but sorry, Paul, go on.
Yeah. We discussed this on a previous 1990 podcast with Mr. Clemente Lisi last year. But why do you think this World Cup has emotionally resonated so much with the English public and football historians, besides the positive results?
I don't know. Well, for me, it's because I was 17 and impressionable, I think. And, it was the 86 World Cup is the one that I remember the 82 World Cup, but I was very, very young. I was 9. I remember that, but I wasn't really emotionally involved, I don't think, as much as I just was a passive observer, because I'm not entirely sure I understood. 86, obviously, was the first one. This one, I think I was the right age. And it was so iconic as well, with Nessun Dorma and that weird Italian mascot thing. It left a big impression. And at the time, I was kind of like getting into doing stats and statistics and stuff like that. So I would kind of like had charts and stuff like that. I was being a bit geeky with all of this stuff. So I was getting really into it. As a nation as a whole, I think the emotional roller coaster ride, the Gazza's tears at the end, certainly cemented that whole thing as the plucky underdogs, going through this tournament and almost winning it. To be honest, actually, the plucky underdogs are actually Cameroon. To be honest, but we English always like a good story, and we like a team that who not necessarily are the best team in the world, but that can go on and as I said a couple of times before, we always think we're going to win it as soon as we win one game. It's that, and then of course when we don't, it's the opposite. We're the worst team in the world. And it happened, and it's still happening today. I was, after England had just, yes, they didn't beat Macedonia in the last game, but they qualified for European Championships with 2 games to spare, beating by 6 points Italy and Ukraine. And yet there were still people on social media saying, sack Southgate. And it's kind of like, oh, well, hang on a minute. We just, I don't sometimes get the mentality. Sometimes we ride the roller coaster high. We have high emotions when we're doing well, and then when we're not, just because of one game when we drew against a so-called inferior team, it's like everybody has to be sacked. It's we can't sort of handle our emotions in a way. Why can't we just be a bit more pragmatic about it? I think whilst, as I mentioned before, this World Cup wasn't the best World Cup in terms of goals scored or games played, especially not by England. They got a little bit more interesting at the end, but the first three and a half were pretty drab. But I don't know. Maybe it is because England got so far in the tournament. That's why we're so fond of it, I guess. And we haven't really had, until recently, we've not really had that kind of euphoria in World Cups. Certainly 2018 World Cup was quite good. We got to another semi-final. But even this most recent one, I don't think it will last that long in a memory, because I think people do associate it with how well English people certainly associate with it, with how England do. So, but I don't know. It was very impressionable to me personally back in 1990, and of course the following World Cup I hardly remember at all, because England wasn't there, and also it was in the middle of the night as well, because it was in the US. All the games were much later, so I hardly remember the 1994 one at all. Can remember just about every single game of the 1990 World Cup. It's weird how it works like that. So for me personally, it was that's what it was. I can't really say why it was so impressionable for everybody else. Maybe the same reason.
It has often been referenced that the Premier League benefited from Italian 90. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, most probably. Yeah, with all of those talented players. I think that the rumours of a Premier League had been coming for quite a while. It didn't happen for another couple of years after this, but I think there are rumblings of a Premier League since the late 80s. So seeing all of these fantastic players on a world stage, I think so. Yeah. Most probably, people wanted to see these players in and out and see these games on a regular basis. I can see how that. I can see how that is a thought process. Yeah, definitely.
Would you say it attracted new fans as well? It's the first time I really remember people who I wouldn't consider to have been football fans talking about football, because those England games were on at prime time TV, like you say. And I think it showed that people would watch football if it was sort of packaged and marketed in the right way, for better or worse.
I think there's always an element of that. I've got a couple of friends who don't like football at all, but they would say to me, "I love it when England do well in a football tournament in the summer, because everybody's happy and the sun's out and everybody's smiling and having a good time." And they're not football fans at all, and they probably wouldn't watch the game, get any of the games at all anyway. But they would say, well, we loved it when England did well in certain tournaments. They won a game, the next day everybody's riding high, and it makes the sunny day even better. So yes, absolutely, football fans, non-football fans, semi-football fans, I guess. Yeah, it's the start of that. As you say, coming into the Premier League era, where football becomes even bigger, and obviously with the start of the Premier League, the money starts flowing in, and I think that a lot of people cash in on that, and a lot of people are getting excited about it. We get now television. Since then, every game is live. You can see, there's wall-to-wall football all over the world. So, yeah. the 90s, certainly, especially in this country, especially in England, the 90s was the boom of English football. And I guess, we're reaping those rewards now with successful teams like Man City and Liverpool and winning the Champions League and whatnot. And yeah, so that's what money does. But you're right. 1990 World Cup might have been the start of it. Yeah, people fell in love with football again, and especially when it's such an iconic, romantic country such as Italy. I think I can understand that completely. Yeah.
And as you say, this is the end of Bobby Robson's reign, remembered fondly. What would you say is the main legacy of his 8 years in charge?
I thought he was very. I mean, it sounds like it's the wrong. It doesn't sound right, but I thought he was very simple. Not to say that he's a simple man, but I'm sure he was very complex. But I think he tried to play a simple game. Whether that, I think it's difficult with England because we don't necessarily have always the most gifted technical players. You do in certain players are gifted and technical. Hoddle, Gascoigne, Bellingham nowadays, and they're great to have on the pitch, but we don't always have. Didn't always have that. So he I think he tried to be very, very simple. He basically stripped it down and said, "This is basically how we're going to play," and it wasn't too difficult, really. A system. It's a system that worked. Instead of trying to be all fancy with it and have. He, as we found, he did actually end up being a little bit fancy by playing a sweeper system for the majority of the World Cup. But on the whole, I think he was very simple with his approach to the England team, and he trusted his players very much, especially the ones that were with him the most time, your Linekers and your Shiltons and your Brian Robsons. He trusted those players to get the job done, which they did mostly on the whole. And then he took the flak for the players as well. He was always the first one to say when England would lose, he said, "Right, okay, that's my fault." He tried to shield his players away from all the press. He would get the flak quite a lot, obviously, whether that's right or wrong. But I think he tried to shield his players as well from that. So in terms of success, as an England manager, obviously he didn't win a trophy. Nobody really has, apart from Sir Alf. But I think that he took us to win a whisker of winning a World Cup. And we don't know what could have been if we'd have won that penalty shootout. And, he was very humble about it as well at the end. He knew that his time had come. I think he was quite relieved at the end there, that he could go back to Spain or go back into club management again, which was less stressful. He was a good bloke. Was Bobby Robson? I have a lot of time for him. He was really good. Yes, he didn't do everything right. Nobody knows everything. Have there been better managers? Probably, but he's a favourite of mine. I think he's a favourite of a lot of people's. It wasn't necessarily a favourite of the press, but he wasn't the worst either. So, I have great fondness for Bobby Robson and what he did for the England team in those 8 years.
In closing, was England football at its most positive point? And was there a feeling of rebirth after so many years of disappointment, including Heysel?
Yes. There was still, yes and no, I'd say. There was still that hooligan element, which really wouldn't be sorted out until we still have elements of it. People can get very excited about football, terribly excited. We still had problems during the last Euros, didn't we? In that final. But yes, that hooligan element was still a problem. That was always a worry in the back of people's minds. Yes, I think there was some euphoria. It was quickly burst coming into the qualification for the 1994 World Cup and the Euro 92, which didn't go well. But there was, I think, England football was in a better place in 1990 than it was at the end of the 82 World Cup when Bobby Robson had gotten the reins. Don't forget, England had almost in reverse during that World Cup. They started very, very brightly, going through that tournament, getting progressively worse until it fizzled out, really. The 1990 World Cup was almost the opposite. But yes, I think Robson was a force for good in English football, and he certainly left it in a better place than he got it. I think there was lots of dead wood to get rid of. I mean, old players which had retired, like the Keegan era, the Trevor Brooking era, and you brought in new players like Lineker, Gascoigne. Young players. Even Brian Robson really played most of his time under Bobby Robson. So yeah, there was some good moments in the 80s and into 90. Yeah.
With that, I'd like to thank you for your participation in this series. As always, feel free to leave questions and comments. For any questions and comments, you may contact me on my blog and on Facebook under Soccer Nostalgia. On Twitter, I'm at SP1873. Mr. Paul Whittle can be contacted on Twitter at 1888 letter, and his blog is the 1888 letter. You may also follow the podcast on Spotify, on Google, and Apple Podcasts, all under Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. Please leave a review, rate, and subscribe if you like the podcast. And Mr. Naylor's contact information and relevant websites are all listed on the blog and podcast listings. So, Davey, thank you again, and hope to continue these discussions on England football history.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a fascinating story through Bobby Robson's tenure as England manager, and it's great to go through it all. It's been fantastic. Thanks for your help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Davey. Just got Graham Taylor to get through next.
That's where it gets fun, you see. You might think it's not fun, but actually it's fun talking about England's failures.
Yeah, well, we shall certainly discuss every match like we always do. Thank you.
Great. Looking forward to it.